When discussing the sources of the climate crisis, it's not uncommon to have overpopulation be put forward as an explanation. The idea goes that population increases have led to a situation in which the planet's resources can no longer sustain humanity. It is then said that this causes a level of resource consumption which exceeds the Earth's carrying capacity and has led to a breaching of the planetary boundaries. From this, it is then argued that the situation we find ourselves in, of rocketing carbon emissions and the general slide towards destruction, is also linked to population increases. It's put forward that these issues can't be solved unless we deal with the problem of population growth. This analysis can generally be found from media outlets, intergovernmental organisations, and well-known figures in the environmental movement. Given the prominence of these ideas and what's at stake, it seems there's a need to check the grounding of this theory further. So then, where do these ideas originate? Overpopulation theory has a long history traced all the way back to the ideas of Thomas Malthus and his 1798 essay on the principle of population. This essay put forward that population growth would eventually hit a planetary limit and lead to societal breakdown due to further division of resources among larger numbers of people. Malthus argued that such population growth would lead to epidemics, famines and wars, and also argued that the division of resources caused by population growth was the cause of the poverty and distress of the lower classes. However, despite the forecasts of Malthus, the 18th century and thereafter has seen world population continue to rise, but instead of outstripping food production and leading to catastrophe, we've seen the production capacity increase with technological advancements. This in turn has then led to a sustainment of a higher population across the globe. That then would seem like the end of the story concerning ideas of overpopulation. However, there has been a rebirth of these ideas in the modern era, with figures like Paul Ehrlich, Bill Gates, Jane Goodall, and Michael Moore arguing that the many crises we find ourselves facing are at least partly caused by the issue of overpopulation. Darling of the mainstream environmental movement, David Attenborough, has been a long-time proponent of overpopulation theories, stating in recent interviews that the planet cannot sustain any more population growth, and that such growth would have to come to an end. He, like many others, links the planet's current population size to the crises in climate and biodiversity. He is even a prominent backer of Population Matters, an NGO which advocates around the issue. So what then are these supposedly reputable individuals putting forward as the solution? Central to solving overpopulation are measures set to control and limit population growth, ranging from an increased availability of birth control to a strengthening of reproductive rights to invasive family limits. Generally, it's put forward that any measure which leads to population decreases will help to avoid excess resource consumption and environmental breakdown. As mentioned before, it can seem intuitive that on a planet with finite resources, increased demand from a growing population would be an issue. So then it seems important to take a further look at the foundations of this theory just to see how solid it is. When examining this further, it seems that the analysis of overpopulation is less clear and actually obscures a lot of the true causes of the climate crisis. To start with, even a basic comparison of population density and per capita carbon footprint shows that there is little causal relation between population size and carbon emissions. If we take some of the least densely populated countries on Earth, Canada, Australia, Sweden, Iceland, and then look at their carbon footprints, we see that each have a very high per capita carbon footprint compared to the global average. In contrast, when you take some countries with the highest per capita carbon footprints, but a lower than average population density, such as Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Qatar, we see that these countries have a high carbon footprint despite below average populations. From these examples, it's clear to see that the carbon footprint of a country has more to do with its carbon emitting practices rather than its population size. And this too applies on a global scale. In reality, the size of the population of any given country has only a peripheral impact in comparison with its economic activities. While at this stage it's fairly established that climate change does have its basis in the activity of humans, in reality this isn't something that is equal across humanity or inherent in every human, but is part of the social system which we all operate in. The idea that people are naturally destructive, or as a whole somehow naturally inclined to pollute on a mass scale, can be taken as false given that it's not people in the main who control the economic model, but a small section of society. And that same section of society has, for the past however many years, been aware of the issues in the current model, but have opted to continue projecting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, committing to deforestation, and extracting on a large scale. The answer to why is because these activities are profitable, and the capitalist system we operate in depends on the growth of profit to function. Many will be aware of the statistic that over 70% of global emissions are caused by just 100 companies. On top of that, the top 1% of society are responsible for over 15% of emissions, which is nearly twice as much as the world's poorest 50%, who are responsible for just 7% and will feel the brunt of the climate crisis far, far more acutely. But worse still, there is some who pick up these ideas for even more sinister reasons. The analysis of overpopulation has been taken up by some in order to justify population controls on minority populations. Misinformation about overpopulation of Rohingya people in Myanmar was used as a justification for their persecution in the 2010s. In India, the Modi government introduced population policies, including offering incentives for sterilisation, citing risks of population explosion. And this is not the first time sterilisation has been justified on the grounds of population booms. Focusing on population growth has also been used to shift the blame onto countries in which growth rates have continued increasing in the last decade. This generally takes place in the global south, where populations are operating under economic conditions imposed by the system itself. Countries in the global north have historically contributed far more to the climate crisis than those in the global south. That's not to mention that any realistic attempt at achieving parity between underdeveloped nations and the rest will require significant development and a changing of the relations between the two. Again, the analysis of overpopulation points away from these conditions and places the blame on the people themselves. Given all this, it would only be natural to ask why then does overpopulation get such a focus? You might argue that the theory has been re-established and given weight specifically because it points away from the systemic roots of the crisis and instead heaps blame on humanity at large. It points the finger at population increases on the whole instead of the radical system change and redistribution as demanded by increasing sections of the environmental and labour movement. It therefore acts as an explainer that points away from those at the top of society and towards humanity as a whole, making the issue seem almost insurmountable. In this context, it's clear that overpopulation is not the source or cause of climate change. Claims that it is are unfounded when examined further and used to obscure the actual source of the crisis, the economic system undergirding the pollution and extraction and burning of fossil fuels. It's only by recognising this can we seek to pull the brake and avoid complete collapse. The solution to the climate crisis will not be found in population controls or pointing the finger at the global south, but instead will be found in reckoning with the economic system, which is burning the planet in the pursuit of profit for a chosen few. Given the inaction on the part of leading figures in states around the world, it's clear that there's a need to force this change. It seems that the answer is not less people on the planet, but more people on the streets getting organised and recognising the real sources of the issue. Alright, so there goes my first crack at making a video. It's a bit rough in places, but I hope to put some more time into this in the future and nail the recording and editing techniques necessary to make something more polished. I'd been meaning to do this for a while and just got a bit of time in between jobs to finally work on it. So thanks a million for watching, and if you want to help me out, you can share this with anyone you think might be interested. You can also leave a comment below with thoughts or feedback. I'm sure there's a lot that could be improved. I've also made a Patreon in case anyone wants to support on there, but I haven't set anything up and there's absolutely no pressure in that regard. I fully intend to continue making videos on environmentalism, eco-socialist theory, climate change, and general strategies for avoiding breakdown. I've been thinking about moving on to a video on fossil fuel projects next, or something on metabolic rift theory. Those two, along with possible future videos on how environmental degradation is built into capitalism, questions of degrowth, and emerging eco-fascism. If you want to get in contact, you can leave a comment below, and I've linked my Twitter account for the channel and will leave my DMs open. Thanks a million for giving this a listen, I really appreciate it, and I'll leave it there, so thanks for that and see you next time. Cheers.